Okay, everybody, welcome to our latest fall winter grid methodology advisory team webinar. We'll go through several main topics for this slide presentation. And different from the last webinar, we're going to pause after each section and allow for some questions and before we move on to the next section, so we can kind of digest some of the changes and some of the major topic areas piece by piece. So my name is Chuck Reif. I'm a co-lead of the Grid Methodology Advisory Team, along with Jerry Woodenfeld. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Andy Justo to take over the MBM and Forecast Builder section of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Chuck. We'll just dive right in here. So the National Blended Models, I know there's been a lot of interest out there about wanting to know when are we going to switch over, and there's been a lot of work done. Some of us on the CRGMAT working. We're working with Raytheon, working with others to make sure everything's in place. And obviously there's an RLC agreement in place to switch over once some things got done, including MBM 3.1 becoming operational and having the AWIPS build 18.1.1 installed at all WFOs, and those are all completed. And we thank everybody for being very aggressive, especially with 18.1.1, getting that all installed. That was great. Unfortunately, the switchover has been delayed because the SBN is fully saturated. In fact, they're at the point now where they are not going to put anything on the SBN unless something else gets taken off that's equally the same size. It's at that point right now where the MBM is, fully coming into GFE 30 plus minutes thereafter what we expected for the agreement. Again, there's a lot of people working together here to try and help improve MBM delivery. Hopefully we'll see something here in the next couple of months. Some ideas have been proposed to test. So we'll keep you updated until we see more. I mean, everything else is pretty much in place to make that switch over. So we're just waiting to get this delivery piece complete. Another thing that's been just started up here in the eastern part of Central Region, from the Great Lakes southward into Kentucky, is a new, kind of relatively new technique for the top-down approach, is to utilize this energy Burgoyne or Bergeron technique, however you want to say the name. The Chicago office has been leading the training and also tracking the results. Looking at the national blend, there's suggestion here of moving over to that technique or something that's more similar. Essentially, with the Burgoyne technique, you have these two grids, positive energy aloft and negative energy low level. They could kind of be your similarities to max sweepable aloft and prob refreeze sleet. But you have to combine the two together to get your actual how much are you dealing with a rain, or are you dealing with a sleet or a snow situation? Like in this example, this was from this past weekend's storm crossing the southern U.S., where you have overlap between the positive energy aloft and these values of negative energy low levels, where you can start getting that mixed precipitation type zone. In terms of a forecast builder here, we've had a few updates come out as of late. One of the biggest ones was deliver out the new menu-based GUI, and we continue to welcome all that feedback. I know we've made a lot of strides with that. Eventually, the plan is to replace the old GUI, just the current forecast builder, with this new forecast builder menu. We don't have a set date on that, but keep trying to use the forecast builder menu. In fact, make that your default forecast builder procedure. And if there are things that you would like to see incorporated, again, just send feedback to the forecast builder group, the nws.forecastbuilder@noaa.gov, that email address is also at the end of the presentation. And we had to do the updates for the Burgoyne method, some changes in there. And then, as we're getting into this, winter season, some of you have already ran into this, as we've had some messy winter weather already. Just remain cognizant of the too many weather keys issue. There's 256. Try to simplify if you get into these scenarios. Try to simplify these complicated weather. Obviously, try and keep things as stratiform or shower. Don't try and separate between the two. If you can, keep, if you have rain and drizzle, just keep it all rain or keep it all drizzle. Do what you can. You can maybe work with the pop grids and simplify your non-precipitation types. I know it's tough. We've had the CRGMAT has put a proposal up to get a wintry mix weather type. So we're going to try and make some strides with that because this issue is just just in the current structure that we have with GFE, and we need something new to handle these mixed precipitation weather scenarios. In development, has been an idea of producing 1 hour QPF, what we call QPF 01, snow amount 01, and ISOCUME 01 grids, really just for informational purposes. This is something that we've been doing in ForecastBuilder in the background for quite a few years, really since the initial deployment or so of ForecastBuilder, maybe just shortly thereafter. But this snow amount 01, I think would be very helpful for both IDSS and DAS. Essentially it's snowfall rate, and so the way that ForecastBuilder currently does this, and I can't recall if it's in the snow amount ISOCUME training module or not, but the way we do this is we take the QPF grids and basically fragment them to hourly, and we do that process by weighting it by the pop, so that way if you have like a higher pop in the first couple hours of your QPF grid followed by a lower pop, more of that QPF is going to go into that higher pop range. And this is particularly important if you have some transitions of precipitation type over that 6-hour period of QPF. So I think this will be helpful. You can just kind of take a peek at them and see what's that looking like, and maybe give you some more information for IDSS. And then fire weather is another area that's been big development. We've got testing actually starting to take place already for this. It's a multi-region coordinated effort, and the hope is to be able to get a test version to all WFOs by March. We're still, again, like I say, it's kind of alpha testing mode, if you will, by some Central Region and Western Region mountain offices. So, and finally, I want to end with some of the super blend consistency issues. You may notice that we had that email come out yesterday with this RLC agreement to move some of the times. And to kind of back up on this is when MBM 3.1 went on the SBN, it basically, like I said earlier, it saturated the SBN, and we've ended up with problems with model ingest. For example, the 12Z GFS can arrive as late as 1740Z. I've seen it right now being consistently around 1715. The problem is Superblend was kicking off at 505 and 1705, and how fast that model data arrived in your office could and more so even, I should say, decode. That depends on AWEB system performance, what else is going on. You end up with these differences from office to office. So the CRGMAT made a proposal and to the RLC, and it was all agreed upon to delay running Superblend and ForecastBuilder, just to ensure that all that data has arrived at each office. And it also is segues us nice into the MBM era, where we were going to move all this stuff forward anyway. This tech order is out and needs to be completed as soon as possible. And again, this is kind of the breakdown of where things stand with these new run times. So we're looking at 5:45, 17:45 when Superblend kicks off. It usually takes maybe 15 minutes or so to run and get it all completed, and then all the forecast builder crons kick off, and there's this staggering approach made here to prevent ISC issues. When we first started this a couple of years ago, we were running into that problem where you would miss grids and without having this stagger approach, it would just overwhelm the network. So with that, I'm going to ask for any questions, anything NBM, forecast builder related, recent staggering, all that kind of stuff. Any questions out there from the field? Feel free to raise your hand or place a question in the question box. Oh, we got one. All right, this is from Kyle Poig. I apologize if I mispronounced the last name. Regarding individual procedures embedded within ForecastBuilder, like aviation, populate, and aviation finalize, are these the same procedures as those accessible in the populate menu? These individual tools are associated with many more options, like for the call base heights from CCL and LCL, and multiple finalize options. And are there plans to include the customizable options from the individual procedures into ForecastBuilder? So yeah, this mostly all relates on the aviation side of things here. Obviously here the objective with ForecastBuilder is to include everything that basically these tools have into it, but maybe with more of the ForecastBuilder feel for them. There's a plan here, at least it's in the development, not that it's, we haven't got a lot of start on it, but to bring that CCL, LCL stuff in for the cloud-based heights, because that is a missing component that we'll acknowledge. Those finalized options, a lot of them are just hard-coded into ForecastBuilder without a selection box to check on. A lot of that is to force some of these integrity checks based on, just keeping the database meteorologically consistent before you try and run your tasks. So at least at this juncture, there's no plan to turn on, be able to turn off those consistency checks. If you end up allowing that as the user selectable option, you could end up with some checks being run at some offices and some not run at others. And so if there's a plan at some point to have, the ceiling visibility and all that on a NDFD, like we have like all of our foundation grids being used in that framework, then you can end up having consistency issues, office to office. All right, got another question here from Brett out in Riverton. Will targeted receipt of data off SBN help the data issues? We get too much data that we never use. Yeah, the problem is, well, it may help the AWIP system performance, like if you can limit what stuff you're getting off the SBN. A lot of this problem actually exists, upstream, that we just have too much stuff on the SBN. Some of the big players are, the NBM, the HER, the GO 16 and 17. A lot of them tend to compete with each other, and then you get into priority and other things. So yeah, hopefully we'll have some progress made, at least on the NBM side, with some testing. But there is some, what NBM has done is it really showed how both the growth of the data sets has become, and having the need to be addressed of something done with SBN. So hopefully that will get tackled as well. All right, I got another message here from Gene in Green Bay. These later cron run times have created crunch for marine offices to get the winds in for Wave Watch 3. Marine offices will discuss, but wondering if Central Region has any guidance on this. Yeah, we tried to actually address this in the email because we knew about that Wave Watch 3 problem, that you got to get those in early enough. So our recommendation was to just publish and get those in, and then publish NDFD, and then the Wave Watch 3 would run on those, and then at 18, and then you can make any targeted updates for that period of the cron for period 4 and beyond, and then those wave updates would get in with the next, say like with the next next nearshore or GLF issuance, which usually I think that WaveWatch 3 is run 4 times a day, so that would come in the evening. All right. Oh, Dan Miller, you've had your hand raised, so I'm going to unmute your line if I can. Oh, hold on. Okay, there you go. Dan, can you hear me? Oh. Oh, all right. Well, I think we'll then continue on. We'll also have a period here at the end of the webinar for questions as well. So, yeah, let me jump on to Jeremy Martin and to talk about the ESTF.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks everyone for your time to listen to us today. I'm going to do a little quick talk here about where we're going on the ESTF. I know we've been kind of quiet recently on that. We've been kind of reassessing how we're going to do this and kind of reformulating our plans here. And I thought like the very first thing to talk about, and this is a abstract of a different talk I have, is what exactly our end goal from the ESTF is. I know you often hear various things out there, whether it's, oh, we just want to mandate this or that, or take away this or that. That's not really what we're after in the ESTF. We want to make this whole process easier. The short-term grids are probably the most important part of our forecast. On any given day, they usually are considered high impact. And what we want to get away from is spending all our time manipulating grids and free up the time so we can actually do more analysis and messaging. You know, the phrase there at the bottom, the forecast is much larger than the grids. You know, I think we all know that's true. We know that, you know, we need to be communicating with our partners, and to do that fully, we need to truly understand what's going on. And our concern sometimes is we get so lost into you can get so overwhelmed by grid editing that you lose track of that analysis part. So our goal going forward is trying to, you know, put the weight of the time we spend, kind of like the scale says, most on analysis and messaging, and only have to manipulate grids when we absolutely need to, or when we have to, we make that process easier than it is in the past. Next slide. All right, we're going to roll this out in several phases, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of all the specific phases, but the first one we're going to do is we're going to try to update everyone's monitoring tools, because I think that's something we can do relatively quickly, get everyone on the same baseline again, and improve the process. The image here on the screen is the GFE forecast monitor. This is an updated version of one we all installed, I think, with the previous ESTF. It now has ceiling and visibility type grids in there. What I really like about it, it also comes installed with something called the GFE grid monitor, which is the image on the right that lets you make scatter plots and stuff to see how certain databases are doing each hour. So if you want to catch, you know, for instance, if the NAM, how it's handling surface temperatures, you can look at it and make a real quick scatter plot to see if it's skewing one way or the other. This type of tool will be I think, very helpful to truly visualize how everything's going, and also let you get a feel for any possible errors that are developing in the forecast, so you can kind of jump ahead of those. This next part has actually been surprisingly popular in my office. We've been playing around with it a little bit. AWIPS 2 has a lot of neat functions that we aren't really used to using, where you can actually overlay what's in our forecast database with real data. We've been playing around with some procedures. I believe Patrick over in Bismarck has taken some of these base ones and starting to make even more. In essence, since you can overlay the forecast with actual observed data, you can create situational awareness monitors that help summarize a lot of stuff, so you're not necessarily having to be knee deep in the grids the entire time. The image on the left is a pop versus radar image that I made. It had the MRMS background field going, and the kind of the shaded image over top of that is actually what the NDFD pop was. So you can see areas, you know, where we didn't have there's no pops and there's precipitation, or if there's areas of a lot of precipitation and very little pop. The other one is the sky versus I don't know why I put sky versus radar. It should be sky versus satellite. I apologize for that. This is actually like a GOES visible imagery overlaid with what the current sky forecast was. And again, the point of this is not, you know, to perfectly represent the actual satellite image, but it's a way to quickly, at a glance, keep an eye on situational awareness to see if our forecast is actually deviating from reality. My initial tests, at least here locally, the pop one especially is very popular. It's a quick, especially when you first get on shift, a quick way to kind of spin yourself up really fast. We're going to provide some of these baseline procedures and also kind of explain how we put these together using the product browser and things like that. And hopefully this continues to grow as we move on with the ESTF. I think if you hit next, there's another image on here. Thank you. In addition, we actually already kind of did something like this with the aviation tools we provided that show you all the visibility. But you can also leverage D2D to actually kind of, I want to say this, query GFE. This image here is just a bunch of different sky cover forecasts, from the HER, from the official, from RAP, and the MBM. And you can use these as just real easy ways to keep abreast of what's coming in. There's always new data coming in, so having ways to monitoring it without necessarily being in the grids the entire time would hopefully free up some time so we can do more of that analysis we want everyone to do. This next thing is we're calling it the Central Region Latency Checker. And thank you, Andy, for designing this. Basically, one of the goals that we are adding into the ESTF is this concept of the first 6 hours of the critical period. I know the ESTF period runs out to 36 hours, but we really want to separate that first 6 hours as something being incredibly critical to our forecast credibility. And what this does, this is similar to the banners we used to get where it warned you that your grids are old, they need updated. This does something similar, but it can scan for specific elements, so it'll give you a banner of what elements are getting old. And it also updates this situational awareness site here by element, so you can tell if your office is keeping up or falling behind. In this image here, there's only 3 of us running it, and the fact that we're all green means all of our grids are good overall. And this is more used for situational awareness at a local level. If you're a coordinator or something like that, and you want to keep an eye on everything, you can get a quick glance to see if our grids are getting old or if there's a problem somewhere. It's a nice way to kind of keep everyone on the same page and see the big picture of how a weather event's developing. And finally, this is a new thing we started too to kind of help us get going on the ESTF side of the house, because there is a lot of moving parts and we want to make sure we do this right. We formed a SUE advisory team that's working with me in the CRGMAT to kind of flesh out some of these issues, make sure they identify any gaps that we might be overlooking, and hopefully provide the best possible process to the field. We've had a couple of meetings. If I could, I just want to thank every one of my teammates here, John, Tommy, Dan, Lyle, and Brett. They've been a big help already. We've already gotten some really great ideas that we're going to help implement here in the coming months. And hopefully, like I said, the end result of this is going to be a process that's hopefully a little more streamlined, so you're not wasting time doing trivial things, time to allow you to truly study the data and be a meteorologist again and not a database manager, but at the same time find ways to actually help get your thoughts into the forecast when they need to be in there. I think I got one more slide. And just so you guys know where the next step we're going to go on here, because I don't want to keep this a secret. After we get the monitoring tools rolled out and kind of get a clear vision of what we want the ESTF grids to look like, the next step, we're going to have to come up with some population strategies, just because there's so much data coming in, it's getting updated so frequently. And a lot of the feedback I got from the surveys that several people filled out was it would help if we knew a little more often when people's updates were coming. So the next step is we're going to try to find this optimal population strategy, that a way that helps maintain the edits we made, helps figure out which database set we're going to use as a first guess, minimizes the time it takes to publish grids to the NDFD, because that's an important thing. And hopefully we're going to form some test beds so we can actually test various methods and try to find a solution to this problem that will not only makes it easier on everybody else, but also supports all of our other missions such as DAS, fire weather, as Andy mentioned. The end goal of the ESTF here is not to be some standalone process, but to be a methodology that we can truly build on to whenever we come up with new products or new initiatives or things like that. I think that's my last slide. Yep. So I'll stop here and open up for any questions if anyone wants to ask me anything. I'm open, or we can wait till the end of the call. It's your call.
right. Any questions for Jeremy?
Looks like I'm not seeing any. If anyone has something they want to ask me later, just go ahead and do it at the end of the call. And I guess we're handing it over to Marcia next.
Hey everyone, it's time for an update about digital aviation services. So Patrick Ide made some what we call one-pagers, but they're actually front and back, so they have 2 pages, but we'll call them info sheets. They're available on the VLab website for the Central Region DAS site. So I put the link here. There are 2 versions. One is for kind of like the default national version of the DAS tools, Aviation Populate, Aviation Finalize, and the TAF Formatter. We do have another sheet that goes into a little more detail regarding ForecastBuilder, and so what tools are run in the background with ForecastBuilder regarding DAS. So check them out when you get a chance. The SUs and the aviation focal points should be getting them pretty soon too, and they can forward them to everyone in the office or get some printouts in the ops areas. All right, as you may have noticed, there is a new TAF EXP formatter. This one is from mid-November. So the formatter gets updated periodically. Tom Lefebvre in Boulder at GSD, he is working on the formatter continuously. And so every so often, Central Region sends out the latest version, and we call it TAF EXP. The TAF formatter, because you notice you have 2 versions, is an older formatter. So we encourage you to use the TAF EXP. It is the latest and greatest from the national level GSD. If for some reason the TAF EXP is just unusable for some situation, go ahead and run TAF. It's there for a backup. In the future, once we get to a really good point for TAF EXP becoming operationally helpful for everybody, we're going to just commit that to be called TAF, and we will no longer have 2 versions. Not quite there yet, but we are getting there. When you run TAF EXP, you'll notice that you'll get a slider bar that says detail level. Just a reminder of what this means. The default it comes up with is 5. So in theory, if you select a higher detail value, a detail level, you'll get more TAF lines. If you have a lower detail level, you'll get fewer TAF lines. It does not mean that's exactly the number of TAF lines you'll get. This tool is still in development, and with this latest version of TAF EXP, I've noticed that adjusting the detail level doesn't always help very much. The thing I've noticed with the latest TAF EXP is, first and foremost, it fixed a lot of bugs from the other version that we had. It makes the weather string is now re-implemented. The weather groups are in proper order. And there used to be like a couple erroneous tempo groups. That was fixed. Wind gusts are refined a little bit more, and it picks up better on your low-level wind shear. We took out the cloud height rounding, so you'll notice that the cloud heights match what is in your grids. And you'll probably see less BR in there because the previous formatter put an arbitrary BR in your TAF, and that just wasn't quite desirable behavior. All right, so with that though comes what you've probably noticed, is that there are a lot more lines in our TAF, like a lot more from groups. The TAF formatter, it reflects exactly what's in your grids. And because of that, it's trying to follow when we have a change in flight category, it puts a new from group, as it's supposed to. However, when we go through and edit TAF, We are kind of rounding, we are averaging, and we're trying to make the best decisions to try to get a TAF down to 6 lines or less. So a computer algorithm has a really hard time doing what humans do. Tom has some weighting algorithms built in, but they're just not quite mature yet. So he's really working hard on it. And I can give you a couple of aviation grid editing tips. So one thing is utilize the DAS color curves. If you did not get those loaded in with DAS Tech Notes, go back and make sure they're loaded. I know they're available on VLab. If you have any questions, go ahead and email the CRGMAT. We'll walk you through that. Because the color curves are going to help identify which category you're talking about. A lot of times in IFR situations, the cloud-based primary kind of bounces between flight categories. Say the ceiling height of 900 feet versus 1,000 feet. And if it's bouncing between those two subtle changes, but bouncing across flight categories over a couple of hours, you're going to get a new from group for every one of those. So what you might want to do before you run your TAF formatter is look through your aviation grids, your cloud-based primary grids. And one thing that you could do is maybe delete a couple of grids in between hours and then interpolate between those gaps. That would make maybe a smoother picture. Kind of eye up where your TAF sites are and make sure that you're not bouncing around at those locations. Another tool I like to use is the limit values tool. For example, you could set your lower limit to 200 feet or 2 if those models are giving you a bunch of 0 or 1 for cloud bases. Another example, you could set the lower limit to 3 SM visibility if you have little pockets of lower values and think that dense fog is not going to be an issue for the night. Another example, you could set the upper limit of 5 SM visibility for a time range so you don't have sites going in and out of BR. Another thing is to pay attention to your sky cover. Make sure you might want to set the upper limit of your sky cover to 56% if you want to make sure you don't get any broken ceilings mixed in with those scattered ceilings. And you can do some editing of the grids with low-level wind shear to smooth that out as well. The time you put into the grids should mean less time spent editing your TAF formatter. That said, I find that removing lines from the formatter is easier than adding lines because sometimes that formatter doesn't pick up on important changes. Bottom line is Tom is working really hard to find a balance on that. So we welcome any kind of feedback you have. Please go ahead and send your log file to your aviation focal point. I know there are instructions out there for saving a log file from GFE. And then your aviation focal point will email that feedback to the National DAS email list. All right, and then one more thing I wanted to touch on before I end is that ForecastBuilder can handle DAS just fine. Many of you probably still use Aviation Finalize to make your final aviation grids. What I want to say is that's not necessary anymore. I encourage you to use ForecastBuilder to make your aviation grids. And that's really just for creating the ceiling grids and finalizing all of the data together. So you can still run Aviation Populate. Basically, step 1 is to populate all the grids, and that includes visibility and cloud-based primary. You could skip, or you could tell step 1 to not populate anything, and then you go in and you run Aviation Populate, and so that will populate your aviation grids, just what you're used to. And then you can go into the next step of ForecastBuilder, or even jump to that finalized step of ForecastBuilder. And that's once you have your cloud-based primary, visibility, and low-level wind shear grids edited the way you want them. So ForecastBuilder will run all of those aviation QC checks that Aviation Finalize would with that default configuration. Now, let's say you want to make sure you have fog in your grids. If you want to add fog to your weather grids in order to conserve any of that low visibility values that you put in there, remember you have to check mark pot fog on that non-precip step of ForecastBuilder. That's sometimes something, or people forget to do that sometimes. But that makes all of the intricate weather connected, all within ForecastBuilder. And so eventually, running ForecastBuilder in that ESTF period should become a routine for you for any kind of grids, DAS, fire weather, and everything. So with that, I will take any questions. I see a lot of people wrote some in here, so we'll step through them.
Yeah. Yeah, Marsha, I think the one there is that we have come from Jim in St. Louis. We have found that the TAF formatter continues to ignore short periods of IFR sealing if the detail is not way up.
Okay. All right, so I have not seen that. I've seen it being really sensitive, like it bounces back and forth. But if that's not the case, I would like to know which formatter you're using and take a look at a log file. So feel free to send one along, either to me or CRGMAT. That'd be very helpful. Because it is supposed to pick up on those IFR ceilings. I just want to make sure your configurations are set properly.
Yep. All right, and then also I'm unmuting you, Dan. So you had your hand raised, and I want to make sure you can ask questions. So.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So Marsha, I guess in your discussion about, for example, the cloud-based bouncing in the grids, to me, that's I envision that being handled with the detail level in the TAF formatter. I don't see us going in and looking for all these threshold bounces that we may have for 1 hour and trying to edit those grids. That gets, to me at least in the big picture, that gets us more into grid editing. To me, that detail level seems like the ideal place to ignore 1 hour bounces with a lower detail level. And as you increase your detail level, you can add those 1 hour bounces if you so choose. But that to me seems like the place to do that. And I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, because that's the direction I thought that the detail level was going.
And you're absolutely correct. And the detail level is getting to that point, but with this iteration of that TAF formatter, it's not there yet. So these are some short-term solutions to possible frustrating situations. But in the end, that formatter should be able to start averaging like a human. I think we're going to get closer to there. The caveat, maybe the downfall, is that it might not pick up on all details then. So I know Tom's still working to find that balance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's more encouraging too, that you're really just addressing the short-term build that we have installed right now. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be with this build for a good month. So, and it's busy weather, and I know that I've been getting a lot of messages about frustration about too many TAF lines. So I wanted to get that out right away. Like, look, we know about the problem, and we're working on the solution, but it's not a quick coding problem. I know that. Oh, go ahead.
Marsha, I was going to say again, and kind of related to this topic, is that Jim from St. Louis mentioned again here, perhaps the detail level can be focused on the first 6 hours or a sliding scale, so it's less sensitive in the later periods. And I found that funny because that's what we just talked on with the CRGMAT call. latest one.
Word for word, actually.
Yep.
Yeah, so Jim, that is being addressed. And I know Tom has that in his weighting scale. And that is, it's been addressed, but at the same time, what happened when Tom made the formatter do that in an earlier iteration of the TAF formatter, it actually just left the last 12 hours with no from groups at all. And so I think he's still trying to find that happy medium of how to tell it, okay, well, if it's been, 6 to 9 hours without a from group, maybe you should put one. So I don't know, something like that. And I do see your question, Jim, about we need new tools from POP from radar, cloud cover to satellite. I think we missed that earlier with the ESTF.
Yeah, I was going to hold off to the end because that came in while you were talking. But yeah, we can address that now. I'm going to address part of it, then I'll send it out to Jeremy. So the cloud cover to satellite, that's an AWIPS, partly just a GFE AWIPS thing that that Raytheon needs to fix, and it's scheduled for 19/11. So we're looking at still another 6 to 9 months or so, somewhere in there, till we get that. All right, Jeremy, I'll let you address the POP from radar stuff, which I know we've talked about too, and then the ESTF team.
Okay, yeah, we do have POP radar tools in there. We need to reevaluate everyone we have. I believe we have one now that lets you do one from the MRMS, which is usually pretty good. We probably need to get some feedback to see if there are deficiencies that people don't like in that, or some way to maybe smooth out some of the rougher points. But I believe as of now we have one that lets you do a straight POP from the MRMS QPE data, which goes to help a lot. It's not as prone to hitting the clutter areas and things like that. There was another question. I wish I could tell you exactly we have it. I think we just need to evaluate what we have right now and see if what we have will work, or how many people are even aware that we have this MRMS tool, and then go from there. As Andy mentioned on the Sky side, that's our hands are tied until we get this AWIPS build that lets us use GOES data in GFE. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is what it is right now. What was the other question? I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, it was about the makeup of the ESTF team with no forecasters. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was just a decision we made mainly because I'm assuming we have we have a little bit more time to chat with each other than trying to get all people on rotating shifts to find the time to discuss some of these issues. That really was probably one of the primary goals, is that it's probably easier for us to meet frequently than it would be for a group of operational forecasters working rotating shifts. We are open to, obviously I want to hear from forecasters. If they have ideas and stuff, we'll be open to listen and everything like that, and I can bring concerns to either the CRGMAT or the SU team. That really is what it was about. It was we wanted to get together a quick kind of advisory team, because we realized there's so many moving parts to the ESTF, and there's also so many potential pitfalls that we wanted to make sure we got more field input than just myself and the team here. But at the same time, we didn't want to make it a burden on anybody as well. And we do actually have the SU advisory group. Obviously doesn't have any forecasters, it's just SUs, but the CRGMAT itself, we are all discussing these things as well and making group decisions, and that is well represented by forecasters when it comes to the ESTF. So there is forecaster involvement here on the ESTF process. It's not just the SUs coming up with the decisions here.
TJ, just really quick, TJ, we just wanted to let people know that the POP from MBM radar works well. Then you can preset the scale to account for Lake effect now. All right.
Okay, that's another. Yeah, I mean, there's tools out there. I think we just need to make sure we highlight all what's available and see if we and see how that goes. So.
All right. Pass on to to Jerry on model certainty.
And one thing I did want to just point out about that radar issue quick is I think where we were with that is we used to have lapse radar, and I think lapse has gone away from GFE. So I think that's where we're missing some of that information now, and there's currently no good way to get the true radar into GFE. And I have not heard if that's going to happen anytime soon. But that's sort of outside of the model certainty realm. I just thought I would add that comment quick. So as far as model certainty, you all have had this installed for probably a year now, maybe a little over. It exists in the edit menu in GFE. So the idea behind the tool is it's a statistical information tool. It helps interrogate the model data within GFE, and it can help target different grid editing updates. And the way we use it here mostly at MKX is actually for situational awareness and DSS activities. So a lot of it, it's been out there, like I said, for a while. I just thought I would, reinvigorate that. So it does have some good features. It has box plots, which I've just recently updated. It runs for a good amount of the grids that we have in GFE. You can do storm total snow, and it'll calculate that all on the fly. Storm total QPF, you can see it for all of the individual models, which is very helpful for diagnosing like which model may be over forecasting the snow amount, and due to the different weather dynamics going on. Then there's you have a wide range of statistical information, 10, 50, 90th percentiles. The typical max, min, mean, standard deviation, skew, warm tail, cool tail, and then there's some probability grids where you can do the probability of a certain threshold occurring. And with those probability grids, something new to this recent techno is probability of greater than the forecast grid and probability of less than or equal to the forecast grid. So that can help give forecasters an idea of where you sort of fall in the distribution of the models. So there's a lot of information you can glean from this, and we try to run it here at Milwaukee pretty much on every forecast shift to get an idea for where things fall. So as far as the new update with the box plots, the big change that has occurred with this build. Previously, all of these dots were just one single color, red. So now you see some color with the dots and a legend to explain what the dots are. I can't quite do it for what every single individual model is, but I tried to do model groupings. So put all the raw models as a light blue color, all of the bias corrected models as a red color. And what this does for you is it really will jump out like on situations where, say, the model or the bias correction for winds is really low. You can start to see that grouping of where the models are. And, same thing for raw models, if they're all really high in temperatures or low in temperatures, whatever. And then I've also thrown in an individualized NBM here so you can see where the NBM is falling in comparison to our forecast, previous and where the official is. And so, this is a good way to really quickly see where your forecast falls and where all the rest of the models are forecasting. So next one. So along this, I've also been trying to really change model certainty into, a situational awareness DSS tool. So I'm adding the capability of actually producing images straight from within the model certainty tool. So what it'll do is it'll actually call the Sacramento Grid Image Maker directly from within the tool. It'll create what's an XML file, and based on what you've selected, and generate an image and throw it out there onto your land so you can see it. So in this example here, I'm doing a wind chill, and where it can generate images is if you actually select this create percentage grids, what I have highlighted down in the bottom in the red box. From there, you choose what the threshold you want. So in here, I was just curious if it was less than or equal to 0, the wind chill. If within the grid manager, you would select the time range that you're interested in, and then it will go through and it'll generate all that stats and everything for the time range for wind chill that you're curious about. So in this image here, I actually showed that new probability of greater than the forecast. So here, the models, I guess, if you would look at it, we're tending to lean on the high side of where our forecast was for the wind chill. It's just a quick idea for where we're falling. If it's 50-50, then obviously we're right down the middle. Another good image to look at. So if you click next, what will happen is you'll get another GUI that'll pop up and say, do you want to generate any images? If you select yes, then you'll get another GUI. So this is very ForecastBuilder-esque. And here's your GUI to generate the image. And in here, you'll see the image options that you have. So you can generate a wind chill, or you could generate the probability of less than or equal to 0. You'll get some options for if you want sample points, if you want to limit the data area. In this situation, I actually did limit it. I limited it to MKX. I didn't show that selection quite right. You can change your zoom in area. This is all optional settings that you can put within actually SACGEM. So just grab whatever you have in SACGEM and throw that in here for your optional settings. And once you hit OK, it'll go ahead and generate the images, and the images examples are here. So here you can quickly throw something out there onto Twitterverse or wherever for the probability of wind chill less than or equal to 0, or whatever threshold you decide you want to use. So what it's doing in the background, as far as the statistics are concerned, is it's actually creating a full CDF, 0 to 0th percentile to 100th percentile, and then going into every one of those grids and trying to find which threshold actually hits, or where your threshold hits on that CDF. And then you can invert that and you get the probability distribution for that. So that's how these are generated. It isn't just actually counting membership and saying what members are less than or equal to that threshold. This is actually a true probability distribution here. And it includes your forecast. Your forecast is part of this distribution. It's just something out there for maybe some SA or throwing out there for DSS. So let's go on to the next one. And this is another thing that we're sort of working on here, and it's risk grids. It takes that CDF or PDF that was just generated and tries to break it down into something that might be more meaningful to just the average user. This was sort of taken from the FSD, Sioux Falls WFO, and I think they may have taken it from somewhere else, as what they're using with the PWPF experiment. So it's an idea of an easier way to sort of look at that probability distribution. If you're looking at wanting to go out beyond that 72-hour period without actually putting amounts in there, this is another avenue you can use through ModelCertainty. So, another thing I'm going to actually be working on too is potentially adding some past cycle information. So with some clicks, you might be able to say how many of the past cycles of models you want to include, which will obviously increase our distribution size. Right now, the distribution size in the early hours is somewhere right around 30 models if you include all the bias-corrected models. Once you get beyond, 72 hours, it starts getting smaller, in the 10 model range. So adding this past cycle information may also help with that distribution. Just looking at different ways to try to help, chug through this fire hose of data that forecasters are being presented with and get all this information from it. So these last couple slides that I went through here, that's all what's in development right now. I would anticipate that to come out with our next tech note, but I'm waiting on some of the dependencies, like SACGEM needs some modifications for this, and so does the NWS in its config needs to add a couple new elements in order to create some of these new images. So once those are done, we'll get a tech note out there so you can all start generating these images on the fly. So with that, I think I am done talking model certainty, and any questions? Pretty quiet.
I'm not seeing any at the present time here, so I think we'll move on. All right.
All right, thanks, Andy. This is our last slide, and basically just a means of providing feedback and asking any questions outside of this this forum. So we have NWS chat rooms that most of you are familiar with, the ForecastBuilder chat room, and also the GMAT chat room. So anything ForecastBuilder related, head to the ForecastBuilder chat room, and the GMAT can be anything from DAS to any other activities, like even this ModelCertainty, and we'll have some people. Usually somebody's in there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so we'll probably get you some feedback pretty quick there. Also, we got the ForecastBuilder VLab site. The links there. There's a form section, facts and FAQ and documentations, training webinar videos. So this webinar was recorded, and we'll have that up there as soon as we can within that VLab, as well as the CRGMAT VLab has a separate page as well. Also, you can email us. The ForecastBuilder group will get to all of us as well. And for your DAS feedback, as Marcia said, send your aviation focal point, the log file. There are some instructions on how to do that. And then the aviation focal point will email feedback to the National DAS email list. And as always, suggestions and new ideas are welcomed. A lot of the changes and improvements you've seen to ForecastBuilder, including the GUI, including even some of the ModelCertainty changes, have been because of the great ideas coming from the field and direct feedback to our group. And we really appreciate that and value that. So with that, I'll go ahead and open up the questions for anything related to what we're working on. So appreciate everybody taking the time.
I got a question here. I'll try and unmute. Hey, Dan Miller, you're unmuted.
This is actually Kevin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the ForecastBuilder suggestions regarding the 256 unique weather keys. I'm curious why the emphasis seems to be on limiting the type of the the suggestion was drizzle versus rain and showers versus stratiform. Why is the focus on those kind of adjustments rather than trying to condense the time steps when, especially when you get out into the long range portion of the forecast? Oftentimes our data steps are in 6-hour increments.
Yeah, the weather keys issue would happen just based on the I don't know if it matters so much on the temporal per se, because if you just have one single grid that has it's just going to happen for one single grid, whether it's 1 hour length or 3 hours length or 6 hour length. I mean, I think it's more of a function that's what's going into each individual grid, what all the P types are, what all the pops are, what all the P types or non-P types for that matter, all the intensities that would be assigned based on, and all those intensities are based off the QPF. Like I say, certainly here for the future, we'd like to really get this wintry mix type in. Would greatly help us. I mean, a lot of it too is just the weather grid needs redesigning. I mean, it's really a lot of what we did, DFP era, and it feels like it needs a gridded transition, really. That's what it was. I mean, when they developed the weather grid, it was really to just handle what was in the ZFB. So yeah, probability coverage, probability coverage, intensity, all the types, and then some optional attributes that you could apply, and that was that. So it really just kind of needs an overhaul. And I know there have been past attempts. I know there was one in 2010 and 2011 to try and revamp that weather grid, but I don't know where that went. But I think this proposal would have a good chance of going through. It's just going to take a little while to make its way through all the AWIPs, Raytheon, that section, get in there, and we have it ready. I also has to update the point-and-click formatter software and a few other places.
One of the things that I've noticed in some of those weather creations, when we come up with hourly weather types, hour 1 you have slight chance of this, chance of that, likely this. The next hour it's chance, likely, and on and on and on. So you're creating distinct weather keys, partially due to the temporal resolution, even without having, even if we limit the weather type to stratiform or shower, or rain versus drizzle, we're still going to be with hourly weather grids. We're going to continue to create additional weather keys each time step as those percentages change in the underlying POWT grids.
Mm-hmm. I think I see where you might be going, is that the sum of all the weather grids is expanding the keys overall for the whole database. So maybe that's another thing that we could look at. And maybe maybe what I can do is I can get some question from Raytheon about that, or get that answered. Is that as your weather database, and same whole thing holds true for your ISC, but as it sums up over the weather database, over your forecast over your 7 days, as you produce more and more weather types, and that might be true then. I'm going to check with Raytheon, but that's a great thought. Thank you for that, Kevin. Any other questions out there? Dear TJ, you had one on mute.
Yeah, I just you probably saw the questions I put in there. I don't know if that reaches everybody or not, but I know you've heard me talk about this before. One way to simplify weather keys would just to be backing out of intensities. I think that would go a long way. My argument's always been that just being really dogmatic about ZFP and intensity criteria in an old directive, I just don't think is serving anyone well, including us. For instance, snow, I mean, that's not even based on QPF. That's based on visibility. The other thing too is we all know that a 6-hour QPF grid, you don't have precipitation falling uniformly over that entire time. So even though averaging may imply light precipitation, very often it's going to just dump at once, and it's not going to be light. So there's just all those pitfalls. There's just inherent subjectivity with what one person calls heavy and light and stuff. And I just feel very strongly that if we just got out of the intensity game altogether, that would go a long way towards not only helping the the number of weather keys, but I just don't think we ever really effectively communicated that. I mean, this is going back to a legacy text product that in that day that was our mouthpiece for communicating information, and we've just absolutely got to get past that.
Great points, DJ. I fully agree with you. And you mentioned about that snow intensity based on visibility and not QPF, and that's something else that we're looking at. That having that snow amount 0.1, for example, I think that might help link that a bit. That you can use that 1 hour snow amount, for example, a snowfall rate, which impacts visibility.
Right, and as you know, even that's not guaranteed. I mean, there's a really good module in that talks about effects of snowfall on visibility. It was a really good in the winter AWOC. So it's a very, very complex thing, but we know for sure it's not directly correlated with QPF.
Yep.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, TJ. Any other questions out there? Otherwise, I know we have run a few minutes over the top of the hour, but all right. All right, Chuck. I don't see any more questions. I think you want to end?
All right. Once again, just thanks everybody for attending this and providing your questions and feedback. And just get back to us with any other questions that come up afterwards. And we will have this available on several of the VLAB pages as soon as the recording is rendered and put up there. So just thanks again. Everybody have happy holidays, and look for another one of these sometime in the early spring, most likely. Thank you.